Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at Talking Heads. World War II heritage, GPs reporting people who aren't fit to drive, and communities having more of a say in planning matters were all up for discussion this week. And so was the Department of Education's controversial pupil database. Here's Stu Peters with more.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Should personal information about us that's stored by government and the way it's used be reviewed? The Department of Education and Children has admitted that it shelved a centralised database of school children on the island at the end of October, after it found it didn't have the proper legislation in place. Speaker of the House of Keys, Steve Roden, brought the subject to the fore with questions in Tynwald. But the situation's called the government's entire digital strategy into question. Is it time for a review of the personal data government stores and how it's used? Are centralised databases a necessity these days for ease of access to information to streamline the way that government works? Or do you object to personal information being stored in this way? What do we think about that? Shouldn't all this data now be destroyed since it was illegal to obtain it? Well, that's kind of my question to you. What do you think should happen? It's all locked down, it's turned off, it's not accessible anymore. But should they go even further and absolutely sort of destroy and wipe the whole thing? What do you think? Give me a call and tell me. Government could profit by selling our data to marketing firms. I trust them not to do that, to be honest. That would be very irritating, yeah. But I trust them not to do it. Good afternoon, Stu. With everything going on in the world at the moment, and particularly Europe, I think that we need as much data on people as possible, says Robin Port St Mary. Right. Why worry if you have nothing to hide? Good point. As for the Education Minister, isn't he now a member of the Legislative Council who should be monitoring this in the first place, unless it wasn't even passed through the keys, says Rob. If data has been collected improperly, fair enough. However, I've always found it bizarre. The schools and teachers work in isolation from the department which employs them and sets policy. Personally, I'd prefer and feel more secure if data on my kids was held centrally by the department rather than in dribs and drabs in a little office of a school, says Jane. Yes, I think that that's a valid point as well. We know how small the Isle of Man is. Everybody knows everybody else. And I think I would rather that there was a central database somewhere that had all my information on. So my medical records, employment records, everything that government knows about me could all be put in one fairly small file, I would hope anyway. If people need to access it, first of all, they need to identify themselves. They need to put the reason that they're accessing that data so that there is a proper, not a paper trail as such, but there is a trail of information to show who's accessed it. If you've got all that information in folders in a filing cabinet somewhere within a school, then anybody can go and have a look at it, can't they? I mean, yes, there will be checks and balances and things, but, you know, theoretically anybody could have a snoop, see what your neighbour's kids are up to, sort of thing. I'm sure it doesn't happen. I'd like to think it doesn't happen, but a centralised database that is secure, I think, would be a better solution. Stu, if you or I break the law, we're in trouble. If a politician breaks the law, they just change the law, says David H. Well, yes. Yes, they do, but I mean, it's just a timing thing, isn't it? In that they'd not made sure, it would seem, that they had the virus, the legal virus to do this, or they thought they did, and now it transpires that they didn't. So I don't think anybody went out to actually break the law, and I think that intent is a big part of it. Hi, so the question that needs to be asked is, who owns the data and did the owners give permission for it to be used? We all own our own data and it should be up to us as individuals, parents, to decide who can use it, says Hilary. That's reasonable, I suppose, yeah. Unless you were a bad parent and the authorities decided that they needed to look at the information with or without your consent. And I think most of us would probably accept that. I don't know. If a private company or an individual acquired sensitive information, that being information gathered without consent, they would be subject to legal challenges and possible prosecution. Why again did government work to different rules? We all know that you can't shut down a database. Just hiding it will make it go away, says Richard. No, what they need to do is to update it to Windows 10, the computer that's got the database on. Then it'll be lost forever. That's the answer to that. If the information was obtained illegally, it should be removed. If I robbed a bank and stored the money in a locked room, that would still be illegally obtained. I could not say that it's not available. Politicians are not above the law. The AG should make a statement about this to reassure parents, says Norman. OK, well, that's that's probably a good legal point, and I quite like the way that you put it, yeah. But on the basis, I mean, if the department thinks that they can pass legislation to make this usable, to make it legitimate, then it just seems that you're making an awful lot of work for people to have to re-enter it all from scratch. I don't know, but as I say, you do make a good point. Hey boy, if the US government... this is another one from Frank. I wish I'd read this already. If the US government can be hacked, then this place should be easy. Yet another intrusion, yet another pointless, obscene waste of money. P.S. Go easy on the pro-government Jews today, boy. Old Ding Dong and Bang Bang won't be buying you any Christmas presents, and that's a fact, says Frank. All right, yeah. Well, that'd be a first, actually, if they were to buy me a Christmas present. Even a card would be nice. Never once, I don't think, in all the years I've been here. Davey called on data protection. Everybody has the right to ask to see any files of data held about yourself. If there's information that's wrong, then you can ask for that to be put right. But I don't believe the DEC needs a database on all children. If they need information on a child, they can get it from the school, but they should have to get the permission of the parents first. Reference this illegal data file. Well, illegal is a bit of a strong word. They've not got the virus for it, but I don't know whether it's illegal as such. How much money was spent on this? All the government had to do was to go on Facebook and Twitter. The kids are giving the life stories on these sites, says Mel. Yeah, I use Facebook an awful lot, and I saw a great thing on it last week talking about data and all the rest of it and security, and it was, the blue plaques that they have, and it was for George Orwell's birthplace, and in front of it was a CCTV camera. And it was just, the irony of that was, I don't know if it had been photoshopped or not, but it was just a fantastic image.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should ads featuring any religious theme be banned? The refusal of leading UK cinemas to show an advert featuring the Lord's Prayer has sparked worldwide debate. It had been hoped the 60-second film would be screened UK-wide before Christmas ahead of the new Star Wars film. But the company which sells adverts in cinemas says it won't show any religious advertising in case it causes offence to those of differing faiths or no faith at all. Is the ban the right move? Should all advertising featuring religion be taken off screens, or could that have serious implications for freedom of expression? Let's go straight to the lines now, and we've got Pat on. Hello, Pat.
This whole issue, this Church of England advert on the cinemas.
Yes.
As an atheist, it doesn't offend me in the slightest, and nor would the Jewish prayer of the dead or the call to prayer by the Muslims.
Yeah.
No problem at all with it. But it doesn't offend me. It does upset me, the fact that they think it's good enough to spend however much they've spent on an advert trying to get converts. Yeah. They could have spent that money better. They could have housed a dozen people. They could have fed the town.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd never thought of that, but you're right.
That is what upsets me more. Why are they spending money on adverts?
Yeah.
Why aren't they spending money helping those that they profess to be helping? It's crazy.
Very good
it's
thought.
Really not offensive.
I've thought about this because, the story is that it could offend people of different faiths. I'm sure that people of different faiths wouldn't be offended. I think that the real story under this is that they don't want to be put into a situation where they might have to take adverts from other religious faiths like Islam or whatever, because, that would then stir the hornet's nest, and they don't want to put themselves in that situation.
I don't see why. They've got a freedom of speech. If they want to spend that money that way, it's down to them. It's a shame that they do choose to spend it that way, of course.
Yeah.
But, let's look at it positively. The adverts could last for 2 minutes. Go and get some popcorn, get some ice cream, go to the toilet.
Pragmatic response. All right. Thanks for that, Pat. Let's see what Peter Murcott makes of it. Hello, Peter.
I think the origin of this was because the digital cinema media found that advertisements that they had for the Scottish referendum didn't entirely meet public approval, or that's my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why, but they seem to have expanded it both to politics and religion.
Yeah.
So that's the first point. I think the second point is that I really think the public will take their own view on this and will regard this as another piece of nonsense against the Christian religion. And for that reason, myself, I wouldn't be using the legislation of the Equality Act, against discrimination on grounds of religion to take any action. Yeah. I'll tell you why. Because I think, and I've said before, that the inclusion of religion and sexual orientation in that act is thoroughly mistaken, because it does far more harm than good when people start taking action. Both of them invariably require sort of long cases, much publicity. I am not convinced that it does anybody any good, except it probably assists people in the legal profession. Therefore, my feeling is that I think the general public will see it for what it is, let them take their own decision. And I think if they did take action anyway, I think it would be mistaken, because it would give rise to the accusation, which is false, that Christians are trying to impose their views on others, which they're not.
Right.
So that would be my view. Leave well alone. It's just a silly piece of PC action. And for goodness sake, if we do have the Equality Act here, keep sexual orientation and religion right out of it.
All right, thank you very much for your call, Peter. And on line 5, we've got Fenella. Hello, Fenella.
Well, I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. I agree totally with the Catholic bishop.
Yeah.
I think he's had points, marvellous points.
Yeah, I did.
He did. And the thing is that I think it's so much better that people, you celebrate your religion, whatever it is. It's so much better to celebrate something than to be fighting and arguing and going on. That's no way to behave.
Yeah.
And we've been to war twice. We had 2 world wars so that we can have freedom in this country. The last generation of men, my husband's father fought in the war. My uncle fought in the war. Everybody's got somebody that fought in the war for freedom. And we seem to have more petty, ridiculous rules about freedom of speech now than we've ever had.
All right, but let me just, for the sake of argument only, I'm not trying to rile you. If you went to the cinema and there was an advert that was trying to sell you on the idea of Islam, would you feel as happy about that?
I would not mind. I would listen to it and keep my opinion, because...
okay.
I just think we do. They celebrate Diwali. They celebrate. People celebrate Ramadan, isn't that when they have their fasting period? Yeah. But I would laud anybody who was actually doing their own thing and being joyful about it, and not. Instead of running around fighting with people over it.
Yep, some good ideas there, Fenella. Thank you very much for your call today. Christmas is a pagan festival hijacked by Christianity, as is marriage. I think the decision on not showing the advert is absolutely correct. Once one religious or even political advert's allowed, it could set a precedent for all sorts of zealots to advertise their particular obsession in a bid to entice others into it. Why should this kind of stuff be thrust upon us at the cinema? Surely Christians don't need reminding of their own prayer. But that's true. Yeah, certainly. But, why should stuff like Coca-Cola and popcorn be thrust upon us at the cinema as well? They're products in the same way, I suppose, if you look at it that way. Stew Christians screamed at the life of Brian. All religions screamed at Richard Dawkins. There probably is no God. How about a bit of consistency, says David H. Yeah. It's easy to just put a ban on all grown-ups believing in fairy stories all over the world. No one blowing themselves up in the name of Allah. No one moaning about the Lord's Prayer. Easy, says Ian. I'm your religious affairs correspondent. Appalled at the cinema's decision, children and young people exposed on screens daily to a diet of violence, sexual acts without love, emotional responsibility and dreadful acts of selfishness, extreme language, yet a piece of wording or prayer which encourages decency towards others is banned. Whatever happened to the British Isles I grew up in, says Anne. The whole world seems to have gone PC crazy. Yes, it does. If atheists and any other religious groups don't like the Lord's Prayer in the cinemas, then they can always go into the foyer or something when it's on. What about all the films that have been made about religion, like the Ten Commandments, etc.? Didn't hear of anybody wanting to ban them. Well, no, but you'd choose to go and see that, wouldn't you? If I went to see the new James Bond film or whatever, or Star Wars film, perish the thought, then as an atheist, I don't know that I would want to see the Lord's Prayer beforehand necessarily. It wouldn't offend me, certainly, but I don't know. I don't watch songs of praise because I find the whole thing a bit... But that's just me. If you haven't seen it, watch David Attenborough reciting It's a Wonderful World from the BBC, much more relevant today, on YouTube. Could Church of England allow Star Wars adverts during church services? That'd perhaps get them in. People question more War these days, not rammed down the throats to recite from toddler. Wouldn't pay to see a movie and have to sit through somebody else's beliefs, says Mary, who's a humanist. Popcorn is a choice. Yes, I suppose it is.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should more be done to preserve the remnants of the activities carried out in World War II in the Isle of Man? A local historian says preserving the island's World War II bunkers is imperative to maintaining our social history. Yesterday in the House of Keys, Onken MHK Peter Carron asked Environment, Food and Agriculture Minister Richard Ronan what was being done to protect the Bride Radar Station bunkers from gravel extraction. Should more be done to preserve these structures? Is there scope for the island to make more of its heritage when it comes to the Second World War structures? Is there scope, when it comes to Second World War structures, or should things be left as they are? Let's go to the lines and see what our friend Howard makes of this. Hello, Howard.
Hi, Stuart. I agree with Charles Gard, but in the context that one page doesn't make a book. You've got to have a collection of all the items, and that will then give you the full story, and that's what that man is relating to. Yeah. Everything that's around the island connected World War II, even World War One, can be put together in a unified method and make a history of the island through the war. Because I don't know if you've personally been to Jersey. My wife and I went down there a number of years ago.
I have, yes. They make a big play of their bunkers there.
They do. They have something that we'll never have and hope never have, an underground hospital.
Yes.
And that is massive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it gives you an awful feeling when you go in. You can actually drive into it.
Right.
That's how big it is. But a lot of people aren't aware of where the various things are, because you come out of ShopRite on Victoria Road and turn left to go up to Governor's Bridge.
Yes.
Just about 100, 150 yards up the road, just set back behind the wall, there's a bunker there.
Ah. And how old is that? Is that a World War II bunker?
It probably will be. It's concrete.
Right.
And it's been sealed up, all my life, more or less. We used to play around there when we were kids.
Yeah.
And that was always there. The bunker was always there. It's a concrete structure.
Yeah.
And even where you're operating, where you're sitting in, that was a training centre.
Oh, it was, yeah.
Because I'll stand corrected on this, but I think the Isle of Man, Douglas, was the first commercial port in the world to have radar.
I think it was. I think you're right, yeah.
Basically because once the war was over, they moved away from here, left the equipment, and of course it was still useful, so it was put into use.
I've been into a bunker at Peel a few years ago, probably 10 years ago now. The Department of Home Affairs realised that they had a nuclear bunker at Peel, and it was an observer station. It wasn't one of these huge drive-in things. You went down, via a ladder kind of thing, and it was a Royal Observer Corps bunker. And I mean, I find that kind of thing fascinating.
It is
a bit spooky, but fascinating.
The war was a dreadful thing, but it's left a big mark in any history.
Of course, yeah.
And it's there, and if you're going to destroy these things, you can't destroy the history, but you can destroy what was left of it.
You can.
And it's still going to be there, but there's going to be no visual effect.
All right, Howard, good to talk to you. Thanks, that was most interesting. Got Michael on. Hello, Michael.
I recently returned from a very quick visit to Ypres, or whatever they call it now.
Ypres, yeah. First World War location.
Yeah, it's the First World War, I know, but it was to lay a wreath on a great uncle's war grave.
Oh, what a lovely thing, yeah.
Yeah, but the point being, we were there end almost 11 years ago, and the difference now, the amount of extra car parks and exhibitions they've got on to mark this 100 years.
Yes.
And the amount of children, school children, students, etc., it was really unbelievable.
Right, okay. So they finally realised what they've got then as an asset.
What I was saying was, now when we're come up to the 100 years for the Second World War, there could be another swell of interest. And we've had Hector Duff going round the schools, and the children are asking them all sorts of questions.
Of course, yeah.
And here we have these units that they could visit. If it was done, and we got this the military museum down there, all connected to the Second World War.
Yeah.
And I know Manx National Heritage have got plans afoot now for something next year or 2017 in relation to the wars, it's all there. We've got all this stuff.
So let's just make use of it. All right, some good points there. Thank you, Michael.
It should be preserved.
Yeah, Eep you went to. They used to the Tommies used to call it wipers, didn't they? Because they couldn't pronounce it properly.
Yes, I still call it ESP or whatever.
Good. Oh, well, I think it's a lovely thing that you did as well, going there to Lairreath. Thank you for your call, Michael. Nice to talk to you today. Howard called. The Amadeus String Quartet was formed in the Hutchinson Square camp. They went on to be a worldwide quartet, so it's not just buildings as far as heritage is concerned. There's music and other things too. Yes. Manx Nostalgia is preserving thousands of old photos on their website, which would disappear otherwise. Membership is now 12,500 from all over the world, but we can only do it if people allow their photographs to be scanned. Get on the site. Let us know if you have any stuck in the back of drawers or biscuit tins. There you go. David called. You've been discussing the bunker close to ShopRite. As far as I'm aware, it was an air raid shelter for Royal Naval personnel based at Cunningham's holiday camp. There used to be several more where the new police station is built. We used to play in the area as children. Okay. And another point of view, the structure on Victoria Road was the air raid shelter for the governor. Ah, was it that? It'd be great to make the World War II bunkers more accessible, perhaps a small plaque on each one explaining what it was used for, says Pete. That kind of thing, or just, those 24-hour sort of notice board things that you see these days at these sites. I fully support Charles Gard's efforts to save the island's unique World War II history, which is the complete reverse of the Channel Islands. My own father was trained at Manx Radio in 1943. Well, what the building was used for then. Before joining the Royal Navy, the internment camps have a remarkable history and the rare banknote issue. The bunkers by ShopRite are air raid shelters. The armed forces banked with Lloyds Bank, and all the banking mandates are safely secured in bank archives and could be made available to Manx National Heritage. That from Tony. Thank you very much, Tony. The Nissen hut forming part of the military museum at the airport was originally part of a military hospital for the Navy at Glencrutchery Road. It was dismantled and re-erected by enthusiasts. Charles Gard is to be congratulated. That from Norman.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should doctors be obliged to report patients who are unfit to drive? Doctors across the water have been told that they must inform the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Agency if a patient is continuing to drive when they're not medically fit. New guidance from the General Medical Council says GPs have a duty to protect the public, even if it means breaching patient confidentiality. What do you think about this? Should doctors be obliged to report patients who are no longer fit to get behind the wheel? Or could that threaten to jeopardise people's relationships with their GPs? Could it lead to people not visiting a doctor for certain conditions? Or is it the most sensible way of making the roads safer? Let's go to the lines and talk to Jill about driving. Hello, Jill.
Hi, Stu.
Are you still driving, or did you think twice about it, or?
Well, I didn't have to think. The doctor told me.
Oh, right.
Because I'm diabetic, and I was having a lot of times when my sugar went very low. And obviously, if that happened when I was driving, I was quite a liability.
Or if you conked out while you were driving at high speed, less than ideal, really.
But the thing is, if people just think about it, if they have an accident and it comes out that they have been advised not to drive, what are their insurance company going to say?
Sure.
Sorry, pal, you're on your own, you know.
Well, there is that, but I can also imagine the situation that, if you're an elderly person and your faculties are fading and you're living out in the sticks somewhere and your car is your only way of getting around, then, it would be yes, of course it's sensible to give up, but I wonder if a lot of people just can't, because of the circumstances.
Well, they really should think long and hard.
Yes, yeah.
I'm all right, I've got my bus pass. So, and I'm not quite out in the sticks. I might be losing my faculties.
Well, I know that my dad, who was the best driver that I knew when I was a kid growing up, I mean, you always sort of hero worship your dad, I think, but my dad I always thought was a cracking driver, and towards the end of his life he was a liability on the roads, and all the family sort of put pressure on him and said, listen, Dad, I hate to say this, but you really need to give up. And eventually he did, all praise to him, eventually he did. He sold the car and gave up, and Mum used to drive him around. But I wonder, we often hear on this programme about, I don't suppose the term is hit and run, but about cars being damaged, cars in supermarket car parks or just parked outside their homes. And I wonder if that is maybe people whose eyesight is going. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Jill.
Well, I don't know. It could be, but I mean, it's just their reactions are slower.
Yeah.
And they sort of might think, oh, I'm getting a bit close. But by the time they've transferred that to the brake, it's too late.
Yeah. All right, some good thoughts there. You obviously did the right thing. So, how are you doing now? Have you managed to get the situation under control?
Sort of, but...
Not enough that you would want to get your licence back?
Well, I have asked, and sort of they've congratulated me on my comedy act, so I've stopped asking.
At least you've got a smile about it. Thanks for calling, Jill. If you've got a point of view on this one, share it with us. Should doctors report older drivers who are no longer fit for the road? Should they report them to the DVLA, or is that a fundamental breach of patient confidentiality? And this from Phil Mack, he says, I believe that if your doctor signs you off work sick and you go against him and carry on working, you jeopardise your employer's insurance cover. Well, I've not thought of that. Would that not be the same with your car insurance? With regards to your doctor, you would have to look at the bigger picture and the full reasons behind him reporting you. Could you collapse at the wheel and kill people maybe, or impaired vision? Good points. Thank you, Phil. Let's go back to the lines. We've got Pam on. Hello, Pam.
Oh, hello, Stu. Yeah, I totally agree that if you, for whatever reason, you're not fit to drive, you shouldn't be behind the wheel of a car because it is a lethal weapon.
Sure.
I was telling Catherine a minute ago, a long time ago, it's way, way back. I mean, a lot older than a lot younger than I am now. And I had a couple of little seizures.
Oh, right.
Never found out what they were. Nobody could turn around and say, yes, you had an epileptic fit or anything, but they said, you mustn't drive for 2 years. You've got to go 2 years without your drive, without any more recurrences.
Yes.
I think it's different now. I don't think it's quite so severe, which I duly did, and it wasn't, well, I was broken-hearted. I was giving up my car.
I'm sure, yeah.
But as regards getting around, I could manage. I live in Douglas. I could manage with the bus. Friends were good to give me a lift. It was not so much in the daytime as you want to go somewhere at night.
Yeah. But you saw the sense in it, clearly.
Oh, well, I had to, yeah. I mean, obviously, because I said, well, if you do that, you're just going to invalidate your insurance.
Of course.
And then the 2 years went by, and right, you haven't had any problems, okay, and yes, you're allowed to drive again, and touch wood, as I say, no problem since. But I do feel for anybody who wasn't as fortunate as me to live near the bus, in the town, able to get about. If you're living out at St Mark's, if you're living out the back of beyond.
Yeah, absolutely.
If there are people like that, if only, I suppose I'm looking in fantasy land now, but if only there was some way, some provision that could make for those people, for them to be able to have mobility in some other way,
Well, I've thought about this, because it's something that we've talked about a few times, and I wonder whether or not people realise how much they would save if they didn't have to cope with the depreciation and the petrol and the insurance and the tax and all the rest of it. People would be saving a significant chunk of money, and how often a week would they need to go out somewhere? And would it not be cheaper for a lot of people who don't go out very often to just get a taxi to do it?
Yeah, this is it. That's a point. If there was some means whereby you could set up some scheme, possibly, mind you, the health service is a bit of a joke, but people who had been used to driving and who needed to drive because there was no alternative, they don't live on a bus route. They can't. Maybe if they're elderly, they're probably not going to be able to walk that far anyway.
Sure.
And they've got to get their shopping. Can the organisations, some sort of organisation, be set up with taxi firms?
All right, some good points again, Pam. Thank you for calling.
Thank you.
Ta-da. The doctor should be obliged to send a report to the DOI if he recommends a person should no longer drive. The roads are dangerous enough as it is, says Charles. So does this mean that a doctor can now bypass confidentiality on psychiatric problems, or indeed anything they want to, if they can make a case for it? Surely this is going to break down trust and people will just not go to the doctor just in case, says Liz. Well, that's one of the problems that we saw in this right from the start. I think I mentioned it in the introduction to it. Is patient confidentiality an absolute? Or, so if somebody goes to see the doctor and they've got a sore hand because they've just murdered somebody, then confidentiality goes out the window at that point. And isn't this the same? We are talking about people driving a potentially lethal weapon. But I take your point, confidentiality is one of those things that is absolute, like pregnancy, you either are or you aren't, or are the grey areas in it. Consultations with any doctor are confidential, and advice given is just that, advice and not enforceable by that professional. Form with signed consent would have to be completed by the patient before any other authority, insurance companies, etc. could be informed. Right. I don't know if one already exists, but I'm not aware of one, says D. That's interesting. I wonder if that is the legal position on it, that a doctor would be breaking the law by breaching confidentiality I don't know. I'm guessing that the experts have thought of that, but I don't know what the answer is. Stu, not the most popular view, but perhaps all drivers should have their driving and ability to drive regularly checked, say every 2 to 3 years. I agree 100%. How many people would not pass after a couple of years driving? Yeah, because you start to drive on autopilot, don't you, once you get reasonably competent at it. Sure, that would see some shocking results and take potentially dangerous drivers off the road also. I think your doctor would be able to breach confidentiality any time that other people were at risk. So this is no different, really. Again, some good points.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Could a Localism Act hinder the whole planning process? And MHK has defended his attempts to reform the island's planning system. Blue and Santon member Graham Cregeen's move has come under fire from government ministers who claimed it could block projects. Mr Cregeen narrowly secured support for leave to introduce a private member's bill covering the issues. Could the move ultimately hinder the progress of developments, or would it lead to communities feeling more involved in projects in their local areas? Graham Cregeen has had some good ideas in the last 4 years. The bendy buses, the diesel loco, shutting Ramsey Post Office. Good luck in September, you'll need it. Right then, okay, we try not to personalise these things too much. Mr Cregeen's idea might sound good in theory, but will only end up in more red tape and more inquiries, more cost, more wasted time. Can you imagine the prom it'll be underwater caused by global warming before it ever gets done, after all the objections? That from Alan. If you've got a point of view on this, do you think we need a Localism Act? Let's go to the lines. We've got Brian on. Hello, Brian.
On planning, first of all, I'm not coming with an opinion. I'm coming with what should be obvious to everybody. We've had 20-odd years of unbridled economic growth, but idiot governments that have squandered all the cash and left us now in dire straits.
Yes.
Now, the fact is, that, and it is absolute fact, that we are skint and our budget has a shortfall and our revenue stream is less next year, and unless we do something, we will lose essential services like dentistry, hospital, all the rest.
Sure.
Or lose them, or we will see them in a much reduced form.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So there is only one realistic way out of this situation. Sad but true. The population of the Isle of Man has to rise. We have to have people here who are working, contributing, and paying into the system. Otherwise, everything will gum up.
Well, there are two ways, aren't there, to balance the books. One is to make more money and the other is to save more money. So a lot of people think that the public sector pensions thing is a way of saving money. Whether or not it is, I don't know, but certainly the other way is to try and enhance the economy and to do more, and that, I suppose, means bringing more people in.
Yeah, and your savings route would be by far the best.
Yeah.
But they've had years to bring that about, and they're failing miserably because it's very easy in times of affluence to sign your name on the dotted line to something that's very, very popular.
Sure.
You've only got to ask David Quirk about that. And then when you get this next government in place, they're going to find that all these agreements have already been signed up to. They've got their hands tied, and all the places that shouldn't have had expenditure committed to them will drag them into a situation where they've got to make cuts where they can least afford to do it.
Yeah. Well, the incoming administration might find themselves in the situation that the Tory party did the year that the coalition won the election, where they went into Treasury and there was a note to say, sorry, the money's all gone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, OK. All right, thank you very much for your call, Brian. Stuart, there's ample opportunity for people to comment on planning with a strategic plan, local area plans and individual planning applications. Localism was introduced in England by the Conservatives in the hope that NIMBYs would object to wind farms and other good things. Is that true, Muriel? That would have backfired on him now then, won't it? Robin Peel called. He said, I've been to meetings where planning was discussed and I just don't think these committees would work. They'd just be able to agree over 4 or 5 points. There would end up being infighting and personal views would come into it. I don't think it would be a good idea. They'd never ever get agreement. But I would like the planners to listen to objections more when making decisions. Sometimes it seems that they just dismiss concerns without taking them into account at all. Communities should have more input, but not via these committees. Stu, listening to your last caller, we're all doomed. I say doomed. I bet he goes around with a black cloud over his head. Talk about a pessimist. Let's all jump now, says Dave. No, I don't think Brian's a pessimist. I think he sees the funny side of an awful lot of things. Stu, it's all a question of balance. Well, everything is, isn't it? We should be able to question decisions, but the government should be allowed to govern, says David H. Very wise words, David H. Thank you for that. Frank's been on and said that I'm talking complete and utter rubbish and that he knows about people who've known other people and it's all done on the nod. It's the Isle of Man, Frank. You know, people do know people far more than they would do in most other jurisdictions, so that's always going to happen, isn't it? Doesn't necessarily mean to say that it's corrupt. I'm afraid Mr. Cragin's proposal for a community say in planning really is a NIMBYs charter. There are procedures built into our planning system for local authorities, community groups, special interest groups and individuals to have their say in the process of the drawing up of the area and strategic plans and subsequent public inquiries, as was explained in detail in a letter in this week's Examiner. That from Nick. Thank you very much, Nick.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks as ever to everyone who contributed to the programme. If you'd like to get involved yourself, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or you can share your thoughts at any time on the Facebook page. That's Talking Heads with Stu Peters. You can listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com, and you'll also find a daily update of what we're discussing on the programme each day on the website too. You can also keep up to date with that information by liking the Facebook page or following Stu Manx on Twitter. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, let us know by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.